In that case, ladies and gentlemen, the next item we'd like to look at is we were dealing with a bunch of worthless European wars. Everybody with me? We had talked about King George's War, Queen Anne's War, or King William's War. Questions? Ladies and gentlemen, in that case, those worthless wars are about to become important. What you want to identify next is you can title it French and Indian War, or you can title it 7 Years' War. It's the same war. French and Indian is the colonial American name. 7 Years is the European name. To this day, the war is referenced by both names. Notice the difference. For the first time, the colonists do not name the war after the king. When the war was named after the king, that was not a compliment. The colonists were basically saying, look, the king is fighting. The king is disrupting our trade. They did not see any importance in the war. They did not see any value in the war. This war, remember, this is from the English colonist point of view. It is called French and Indian because that is who our enemy is. From the colonial point of view, that is who we are fighting. In Europe, they call it the 7 Years' War. First irony we want to get out of the way. We call it French and Indian. There are natives that fight on both sides. Ladies and gentlemen, Indians that are allied with the French fight with the French. The Iroquois and other Indians that are allied with the English fight with the English. Why would Indians be on both sides? Because if you were a Native American and French allies were with the French, for example, Huron, the Indians that hate the Huron were going to side with the English. Please understand, this is one of the natives' greatest weaknesses. Their traditional rivalries, Elkhorn-Delavan, trumped their ability to come together as natives. So please be aware, the native population will largely be divided, half on each side. Half of them are supporting their French allies, and half of them are supporting what they believe are English allies. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item I tell you, you will have to know. In fact, when we start looking at things for the next unit, it is much easier for me to say have to know. In the next unit, in fact, Cleveland might as well start pretending I'm nice. Pequots. What happens to them? Somebody yelled out, Puritans kill them all. Who were the Pequots? Who is the Pequot? Give me a reference. Squanto. Fundamental Constitution. Which one is that? Life, liberty, property. I think I had a fundamental order on the board. That would be?
Britain.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are 3 events that conclude the French-Indian War. We will refer to them as the 3 Ps. We then have this horrible little acronym, SSDTTC. The way we say it is sugar, stamp, declaratory, township, T, coercive. Doesn't make any sense. Sure, sounds dumb. 2, take Cleveland. Why do you have to do it that way? Because they go in order. Ladies and gentlemen, starting now, the order matters. We are trying to figure out what gets us to that. Ladies and gentlemen, French-Indian War, right there, it is about Ohio. We are after Ohio. And when I say Ohio, it's not that, it's all of this. Ladies and gentlemen, Ohio is the Ohio Valley. It is most of the land west of the Appalachia going out to the Mississippi River. The French and Indian War is about Ohio. There's a conflict. What's the conflict? The French want it for fur trading. Under fur trading, the comment was made, they don't have a lot of settlement, they don't have a lot of people, it is wild, because they want to kill little furry critters. The English want to develop it. They want to set up farms. They want to set up towns. If you set up farms and towns, you drive off the wildlife. The 2 will not coexist. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this might be a value on your test. I know you've all read. The original charter of Virginia clearly stated that Virginia went from coast to coast. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of Virginia, the English firmly believe this is theirs. The French firmly believe they were there. The English had not crossed the Appalachia much. The issue is, they're not going to share it. Who gets it? In 1752, if you go like that, the French begin to build a string of forts. It starts up here along what is today Niagara Falls, and they begin to build them down the Appalachian Mountains. Ladies and gentlemen, the French come up with a plan. They are going to build a line of fortresses along the English backside of the Appalachia. The idea is these forts will prevent the colonists from crossing into Ohio. Understand, the forts are going to become very important. Not only are they the cause of the French-Indian War, they are going to become one of the P's. The forts come back, big time. So please understand, the French are building forts because, and they want what? They want Ohio. Understand that. Ladies and gentlemen, to the English, this is a threat. This is a challenge. Now remember, some of you are probably trying to figure out, why did I give you King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George, all that junk, right? Remember the pattern? England and France are fighting. England and France and Europe are enemies. As the French begin to build a line of forts, the English, of course, realize they do not want to be told what to do, bless you, by the French. The English are afraid that the French are stealing their land. As it comes down through, specifically Pennsylvania, do the Pennsylvanians appear to be the most aggressive folks? They're very religious. They're Quakers. It's owned by who? William Penn. William Penn is not going to take a hardline stance. What's the next colony south of Pennsylvania? Virginia. Who owns Virginia?
King.
The king. So, ladies and gentlemen, if French forts are built on Virginia's soil, the French is therefore intruding on whose land? The king's. Ladies and gentlemen, as the French are moving their way south, the governor of Virginia begins to get worried. He's on your term, Lord. I'm sorry, I haven't given you the next one yet. His name is Robert Dinwiddie. He's technically the lieutenant governor. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Dinwiddie is the man who begins to believe that the French must be stopped. What specifically? Think of the forts as a line. The forts are designed to make, kind of like the Great Wall of China. The forts are designed to make a barrier. Once those forts go up, the English are designed to be cut off. What Virginia decides is, we must protect Ohio. We must protect that land for the king. Robert Dinwiddie will assign a 21-year-old Virginian to go out, survey, and build an English fort. Ladies and gentlemen, at this moment, the French have built forts from Lake Erie down to the edge of Virginia. Robert Dinwiddie has hired a young, small group of Englishmen, Virginians, to go out and find the location of an English fort. The young man goes out. He finds a place that actually is in Pennsylvania, because clearly, what are they trying to do? They're trying to keep the French out of Virginia. They find a place where 3 rivers. The city of Pittsburgh is built around 3 large rivers. Right in that location, the Virginians identify a perfect spot. They survey it. They put up little landmark stakes. They go home. Governor Dinwiddie approves. He sends 200 men to build an English fort. Ladies and gentlemen, the Englishmen go back, and they are supposed to build an English fort to act as a gateway. This is supposed to stop the French incursion, and it is supposed to be a place where now the English have safe passage to the frontier. Please be aware, I'm intentionally avoiding something. Folks, the 200 Virginians arrive, and guess what they discover? The French beat them. At almost the exact same spot where the 3 rivers, where the stakes were, the French had begun to build their own fort. Ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of this unit, that fort will be known as Fort Duquesne. Fort Duquesne, geographically, is located where Pittsburgh is today. The French begin to build the fort. The French are moving further down the frontier. Please understand, folks, Fort Duquesne, you will need to be able to understand or explain the French Indian War. That is kind of the location where everything is going to begin. The group of Virginians realize they do not want to challenge the French army, which is much bigger, because the French, they literally have their army, the blue coats, building the fort. The Virginians retreat south. They head into Virginia. They're looking for a new location. For those of you who are having trouble, the forts for the French are trying to cut the English off. For the English, they are trying to protect passage to the frontier, Ohio. Next, the Virginians run into a French scouting party. The French were either out hunting or they were looking for the next fort. The two groups run into each other in the middle of the Virginian wilderness. Somehow or another, tensions flare, hostilities rise up, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of the fighting. On the frontier of Virginia, the 200 Virginians run into a small French scouting party, and the two fight each other. Men are killed. Ladies and gentlemen, one mistake is made. The English have 200 men, probably versus 20 or so. The mistake is they don't kill everybody. In the small skirmish, of course, some of the French escape and they go to Fort Duquesne. You guys aren't stupid. When you arrive at Fort Duquesne, what are you going to tell the rest of the French army? We were attacked. We were ambushed. And if you want a name at this point, the French commander is named Montcalm. Technically, he's the Marquis d'Ay, but you can just call him Montcalm. Of course, hearing that the English have just attacked and killed his people, Montcalm goes out to find the Virginians. The Virginians are hopelessly outnumbered. When they hear the French are coming, they flip over their wagons, they chop down some trees, and ladies and gentlemen, in 1754, what is generally referred to as the first engagement of the French and Indian War, it'll be referred to as Fort Necessity. Folks, Fort Necessity is a small makeshift fort created by the English. Fort Necessity is not a permanent structure. It was basically, the material that they had to build the permanent fort was simply flipped over, and they are going to try to defend themselves versus the French army. The French quickly surround them. Folks, at Fort Necessity, there's a small skirmish and fighting, and the French then basically, they agree to talk. The English commander agrees to sign the French document. The English commander basically agrees to surrender the Ohio Valley. The English commander agrees that it was the English who instigated the original attack. And in exchange, the 200 Virginians will be allowed to go free. Ladies and gentlemen, Fort Necessity will be the beginning of the French and Indian War. The English, of course, are now going to be outraged. The English are not going to allow the French to simply take Ohio. Ladies and gentlemen, at Fort Necessity, the Virginians signed a treaty they can't read. They forfeited the Ohio Valley, and they were clearly outclassed by the French. There's a reason up to this point I have not said a whole lot. Who is the Virginian? Ladies and gentlemen, the young Virginian at Fort Necessity is a 21-year-old George Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, the Battle of Fort Necessity is not a glowing victory. It is not an enormous achievement. Yes, George Washington is able to get his men out, but he signed a treaty he could not read. He basically agreed to surrender Ohio. What will be the English opinion as of this moment? How dare they! For those of you who do not understand, as of this moment, England will go to war for what purpose? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a war of pride, spite, anger. Technically speaking, what are they fighting for? What is the objective? Who will the winner get? Ohio. Does England give a crap about an Ohio? Do they even know what an Ohio is?
No.
No. What do they know? I hate the French. How dare the French? Ladies and gentlemen, when the French and Indian War starts, we are going to see a French army that has done what for the last several years? Lived in America. They know how to work with the Indians. They've adapted. And we see an English army that is relying on what? Their European arrogance. It is going to be a very, very interesting war in the first couple of years. Ladies and gentlemen, please identify 1755. If you did not understand, folks, Fort Necessity is not much of a battle, is it? Ladies and gentlemen, Fort Necessity started the war. England declares war on France, and they say, we will punish you. What is it I want you to keep in the back of your little noodle? England just joined the war. They don't understand. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, 1755, England sends Edward Braddock. Folks, England is going to be England. This is exactly the question over here. Clearly, England doesn't expect much out of those worthless militias, right? They're disorganized, they're uneducated. In 1755, an English army is sent to America. It is led by Edward Braddock. Edward Braddock is a very distinguished, he is a very proven English general. It is his job to go to America, think of it as kind of a joke, take out his leather glove, smack the French across the face, and teach them a lesson. Folks, put this in the English point of view. We don't give a crap about Ohio, but nobody challenges us. Why can't the English believe that this is even happening? In America, at this moment, there's 1.5 million English settlers. Anybody got that in their head? 1.5 million English. French population is estimated at 90,000. We have a county of 1.5 million and a county of 90,000 just picked a fight. The English, in their minds, are like, well, this is going to be quick and easy. The French don't have the resources. They send Edward Braddock. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, Edward Braddock arrives and everything about him. I wish at this moment we should put up kind of a cute little video clip. He comes with 1,400 redcoats. He will be joined by 500 Virginians, once again led by George. Let me repeat. Ladies and gentlemen, Edward Braddock brings the British Army. They're redcoats. That is not a joke. If you cannot identify them, you are going to have a hard time in the next test. He has 1,400 and he's joined by a 500-man militia of George Washington. In coats as bright red as this. Edward Braddock arrives in Jamestown. He organizes his army and they immediately march right to Fort Duquesne. Ladies and gentlemen, the English have been challenged. They are going to march out and they are going to meet the challenge. Now, for those of you who do not understand, at this time in history, the weapon is a musket. It's an exceedingly powerful weapon. You throw your black powder in, you pack it down, you pull a cock. Many of you would say it's a rifle. A musket is a smooth-barreled weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, if it hits you, it's going to put a hole inside you that big. The impact is probably going to put you right to the ground. Yes, it will kill you. Problem, it's a smooth barrel. You pull that trigger and that ball is bouncing all over the place. Literally, from here to the back of the room, even if I pointed at that bright orange shirt, one bullet is going over his head. The next bullet goes down at his feet. The next bullet, I hit Griffin. The next bullet, I take out Troy. Folks, what happens? Yeah, the last one went straight. Ladies and gentlemen, the bullets bounce. What had happened over the last several hundred years? The English and the French developed what is called, please write down, standing line formation. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen this in movies. We will use it up through the Revolution. In fact, they tried to use it during the Civil War. In standing line formation, you march out to a battlefield. Men are literally row to row. Remember, your weapon is inaccurate. Your commander says, ready, aim. You have your gun up here. There might be another group of men standing right behind you. You might even have one group on the knee. Folks, the entire purpose of standing line formation, in fact, at this time in history, when you pulled your trigger, you turned and looked the other way. One, that way the backflash of the gunpowder didn't burn your face. And two, these guns are so inaccurate, looking down the barrel ain't gonna make a difference anyway. And if you guys don't get, what's the big deal? Why am I writing down? Folks, standing line formation is the dominant military style for 200 plus years. It's not stupid. Folks, what happens? You yell fire, 100, 500, 50, 75 men shoot their gun at one time. Remember, we were shooting at Keaton, right? Do I care which guy hits him? There is a wave of lead coming this way, and anything standing in front of the wave is going to have holes in them. You take this powerful weapon, and you make it militarily effective. What you need to understand, folks, is when you fight in Europe, these idiots are descendants of knights' chivalry. Have you ever seen, like, King Arthur? You know, the rules of war? Folks, in Europe, battlefields are an open field. It's like going to the football field. The two armies would meet up, they'd beat the snot out of each other. At the end of the day, one side loses and you let them retreat. You know, your victory is you force them to retreat. You don't shoot officers, because what's the job of an officer? They're kind of like the referees. It's their job to keep it civilized. As one army is getting beaten, you call off the dogs. It's kind of like in a football game. If you had no officials, people would keep hitting harder. They would take more cheap shots. The officers are supposed to keep it in order. So, ladies and gentlemen, Edward Braddock in 1755 marches out to Fort Duquesne. You guys get it? Do you? Where is Fort Duquesne? It's the middle of the Pennsylvania wilderness. Edward Braddock is wearing a what? Bright red coat. His men beating on drums, walking down the road, basically kind of like ding, 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 here I come. They arrive at Fort Duquesne, they attack Fort Duquesne. Folks, the English and the French have attacked forts for centuries. That's not the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, as the English attack Fort Duquesne, strange, weird, crazy, cheating, 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 cheater, 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 happens. Stupid Indians. Nobody, no, that's not fair. The Indians were not inside the fort. They weren't dressed in a bright color. They weren't lined up in big groups. The Indians were camouflaged. How dare they? Gutless cowards. They hid behind trees. So as the English are trying to fight the French, the Indians literally would come up behind. They'll use sniper attacks. They deliberately try to kill the officers because the English become disorganized. As the attack on Fort Duquesne failed, the English turn. They head back to Virginia. But what happened? In Europe, what did I tell you? You're allowed to return home in defeat. Folks, the Indians keep attacking. They hide in the woods. They come out. They kill a few people. In fact, by the time the English get back, only 500 are left alive. Braddock himself is killed. Ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the battle, and folks, if you're looking for the name, you call it the Battle of Fort Duquesne. Folks, the Battle of Fort Duquesne is about to show us a conflict of two military strategies. You have standing line formation versus guerrilla tactics. Make no mistake, if you fight out an open field, standing line formation is a superior, proven tactic. If you fight in a wilderness, this guerrilla crap is a problem. In the English, the best strategy they had against it was you're cheating. You are a cheater. Folks, for the next 2 years, the English will lose every single battle. The English get their butts kicked. Battle after battle, incident after incident, the French are expanding. The French are pushing forward. So ladies and gentlemen, what I really want to get to is first, that's why you need to know Fort Duquesne. You need to know Fort Duquesne as kind of being the moment where you see what the war is going to be like. For the next 2 years, every battle is identical. What did the English begin to argue? We never wanted Ohio in the first place. How can the colonies not defend themselves? The Indians don't fight fair. Ladies and gentlemen, the English are making excuses. The English are trying to justify their failure. Folks, what is the problem? The English are not adapting. They are not changing. They refuse to admit that what they do might not work. Ladies and gentlemen, if England doesn't do something different, the English will lose. And we will all speak French. Parlez-vous français? In 1758, England will make a change. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1758, and this is one you will definitely need to be able to reference, the king, being embarrassed, dismayed. Remember, just like America and Vietnam, what was the king told? This will be easy. In 1758, the king agrees to switch his prime minister. In 1758, an eccentric, crazy, weird gentleman named William Pitt agrees to take the prime ministership. Ladies and gentlemen, England has been in a war that they are getting trounced. For those who don't know anything about England, they are the most prideful people on earth. England hates to admit a mistake. They hate to admit defeat. William Pitt agrees to become prime minister with one condition. He wants total control of the war. William Pitt basically says he will take over, but it's his war. The Parliament has to agree to frickin' stay out and give him control. The Parliament is delighted because the war is going badly. They are losing. William Pitt is basically agreeing that whatever happens is his responsibility. For those of you who have never had me before, you missed it. I said William Pitt is a little bit different and crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistakes, William Pitt was eccentric. Many people think he was schizophrenic. He would talk to himself. He would smash mirrors because he would think that they were staring at him. He was a different dude. Why on earth did they give him authority? He came from a prominent family. He had a military background, and he agreed to take, he wanted it. Ladies and gentlemen, for our purposes, William Pitt takes over, bless you, and he makes several changes. Here they are. Folks, this is where the war changes. Number one, England is going to begin to spend money. Money, 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 money. Folks, up until this point, England was trying to win a war on a budget. They did not want to spend too much. They did not want to, get too committed. William Pitt is going to basically pull out everything. Two, William Pitt is philosophically going to change. For hundreds of years, England has fought the same way, and they've always promoted officers based on seniority. William Pitt is going to hire two young, fresh out of kind of military training school men to be the new commanders. Their names are James Wolfe and Jeffrey Amherst. James Wolfe and Jeffrey Amherst will be given the responsibility of fighting and winning the war. For those of you who are having trouble, please understand, William Pitt realized that the strategy wasn't working. Old generals are going to continue to do what? The same thing. That's what they've been trained. Young generals are more likely to try something new. Specifically, what will England begin to do? Befriend the Indians. Ladies and gentlemen, with the use of Amherst and Wolfe, the English will begin to go to Indian tribes and convince them to fight against the French. Last but not least, probably more important, ladies and gentlemen, William Pitt is philosophically going to argue. He is philosophically going to implore. Ohio is of value. William Pitt is going to support the pure mercantilist idea that the value is not taking the fur, it is not even stealing the gold. William Pitt argues the value of this new land is the land itself. William Pitt argues that in 100 years from now, that land will continue to produce goods. We want to be the ones who control the land. William Pitt basically is going to argue, we are not fighting this to kill the French. We are fighting this to win Ohio.